Hello there. I am so glad y'all are here. I hope you've all had a fantastic week. It has been really quite something here lately. It's There's so much happening, there's so much emotion, there's so much energy, there's so much yada 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 yada. And I'm just kind of glad that I have found many moons ago how to ground myself. I hope that y'all have too, because I think it's so much fun. I like stuff. I like to do things. I like enjoying different topics of conversation. I like enjoying different people of different religions, faiths, nationalities, culture. And sometimes it feels like we're so isolated within our own little mindset that we can't do that anymore. And I love that I work with people, that I interview people, that I play with people from all walks of life. And I hope that y'all do too, because you know what? It really is all about relationships and not um, buying into the angst and stuff. It's always going to be there. There's always a bad guy. There's always good guys. There's always people that you don't even know what they are, but they're still in your world and you learn about them, right? So I just love what I get to do for my job. And so that includes tonight's guest, who is one of the nicest young men I know. He is, and he is a young man. So his name is Nick Muley, and he is a paranormal investigator. He's also a paranormal adventurer. He's a lot of fun. He is, his ride or die really is our friend Tom McNicholas, and they have been on an adventure this week. So we're going to let him tell us about it. And I am these guys. They get around so much, and they're so much fun. So oh, and we got Tom McNicholas and Jeremy York already in chat. So let's bring Nick in. So hey.
Hi there.
You have had such a big time.
I certainly have. And
You always do, though.
before I got on here, I had to make sure that I had a good nap after, in between because
I
I
bet you did.
had the so-called paranormal hangover.
Well, that happens. Yeah, people think that that's just not a thing. It is totally a thing.
It really is. It really is.
How do yours manifest?
Oh man, I think it's just after all the excitement that you're going through, like, because when you're going on these trips, knowing that you're going to be meeting a lot of investigators, whether you've seen them before or you haven't seen them in such a long time, or if they're brand new faces, again, it's
Yeah.
just this adrenaline and excitement that you get, this thrill. And once you've
Yeah.
exhausted all that, that's when after the entire event's over, that's when it really starts taking its toll on you. Not to mention, you have to get up early in the morning, to go to these things. You're up through a good portion of the day. So you use quite a lot of energy for that.
You do. Well, Tom McNicholas says eating spaghetti and meatballs seems to be how you recover.
Well,
So,
that's what he was doing because we went to Olive Garden last night and we actually went
uh,
out with Scotty Rorick and I forgot her last name, but her first name is Gail. We went out
mhm.
to dinner with them and he was getting us spaghetti and meatballs and we were having a hell of a time, like just joking around. So in fact, there was also another table that was nearby that they couldn't help but hear what we were talking about and stuff, and I could see them laughing across from us. So they were,
I do not doubt that.
yeah, it's like we didn't know who they were, they didn't know who we were, but they were having, I think they were getting quite a laugh from us.
Well, having you know spoken with you, I don't even know how many times, because we have so much fun together, and you're such a good guest and a good man. And then Tom McNicholas is a riot. I absolutely can see, and you don't meet strangers. That's one thing I will say about you. You do not meet a stranger. And
Exactly.
that's a Southern thing, but it's a real thing. Okay. And I think that's a really fun aspect of what we get to do because you're a big personality. You get people to write for different books and stories, and you love learning about their experiences. And so, and I get to talk to people about that too. And that to me is just like, oh my gosh, I have never spoken to this person before. Let's see what they've done, And when I go to events, I like to do that. Just, we're similar in that too. And
What's up, Kate? Yep, I knew she was going to say that.
but it's when you can bring that different energy to an experience like that, it's so fun because people respond and they get excited too. And so that's why I think that going to the right Paracons, it's just such a, even if you don't know each other that well, it can evolve into a chance to like kind of a love fest. You're getting to meet people you've seen online. You're getting to meet people that, have seen you in different capacities.
Yeah.
Part.
Well, and not to mention like just the dozens and dozens amount of photos that are taken at these things.
Yes.
Like you see it for many others, they've only seen me in photographs or videos or like something like this on an interview. When they have the actual, the opportunity to actually meet me in person, that's what makes it really exciting. Then they're like, oh my God, he's going to be there. And I'm finally going to meet him or something like that. So that's the thing I find really special. But, when it comes to these Paracons, I mean, when Tom and I started going out to these on a regular basis, we already knew right from the beginning when we got started that there wasn't going to be that many people we were going to know, because at that time we didn't really we didn't have as many connections as we do now. So we knew we had to kind of start off from scratch, but then afterwards they started hearing about, especially because I did more of the talking. Yes, Kate, like what you said, you never forget me. So
I would agree.
She also lives in the Chicago area too, so she's had her opportunity of meeting me quite a few times. And but yeah, like we knew we were going to once I started, talking about certain subject matters of the paranormal or cryptozoology or whatever, that's what would eventually cause them to approach me and want to talk to me. Of course, in addition, my vest with my patches and stuff like
vest.
That.
You cannot discount the vest.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I've always said a lot with my vest too, is much like a lot of these real motorcycle clubs, like even the Hells Angels, for example, is that when they wear that patch on their hey, Jill, I haven't seen you in a long time. Great to see you. But, when they wear that patch on their back, as well as myself, they have become an icon to that particular subject matter. People want to be around them. Women want to be around them. Other men want to be around them. Even at times, kids want to be around them because they're so curious. It's the exact same in my case with my vest. So that's what draws a lot of people, especially a lot of other investigators' attention.
Yes. Well, it's a conversation starter. I mean, it's one of those things that, you're known for it, right? They're going to know that's you when they see you. But even if they don't know you online or they haven't read anything that you've put out, then, they're still going to be fascinated because there you are saying what you're there for and what you do. I think that's cool. I think it sets you apart in any crowd.
Well, and when I made it, because the vest is now over 7 years old. So like even in 2018, no one's really ever put something like this together before. So at that time too, it was such a new thing that it was kind of one of those things that some other investigators would be saying like, oh man, why didn't I think of that before? That kind of thing. So that's what makes it an attention drawer, if you will. And, but like you said too, it's not just something that has never been seen before. But more importantly, it's like you said, as soon as they see me, they know immediately that that's me right there, because it's
Yes,
the only vest of its kind. It does not represent an actual team, so it's a custom made vest, and it's something that no one else has.
exactly.
I've actually even found out. I just did this like a few weeks ago, and I was not expecting this, but so I think I was trying to type a message or something involved in my vest, and I guess I must have been really exhausted or something, but I ended up typing it in Google search or something like that. And all of a sudden, I was not expecting this, but the AI was on. And so when it responded back, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Even the AI has identified me with my patch. Like,
I love it.
wow, like holy cow. Like I didn't think it was going to expand that further out. So I'm even on AI now.
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, it's so distinctive. And, when you decided to do that, how old were you?
At the time when I put that together, I was about 25 years old. So I
Yeah.
was pretty much in a way, again, comparing it to like real life motorcycle clubs, I was kind of at the age where a lot of newcomers that want to join these kind of clubs usually are around that particular age. So,
Mhm.
and I watched a lot of the documentaries and stuff like that. And yes, I made sure, to give the ultimate respect. And most importantly, I was doing things correctly, like making sure I did not add like a bottom rocker patch that represented a state, or a 1% patch, or the MC patch, those kind of things. As I would say, I do not wear any of that kind, and most importantly, do not wear a 1%er patch. It's like within my belief, I claim in a way that I'm the 1% of the 1%, like the one person that I'm not in that lifestyle, but I never wear the 1% patch. In other words, will I ever wear it? Absolutely not.
Right. Well, respect.
Yes, there was. In
You know,
fact, I've never even said this. Well, it's been almost 2 years now. I was on another paranormal podcast in the UK, and the guy that was interviewing me, he was actually trying to join the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. And I mean, yeah, I was a little concerned because he said he was going to, let the UK chapters know like about my patch to see, just to get their personal opinion on it. And he got back to me later on, and he told me that, to my surprise, they were reportedly impressed with the patches because, one, I was following the rules correctly, and two, they liked the idea that I was paying homage to them. So I've even been, notorious with I don't know if it ever got word back here, but I know in the UK they liked it.
well, there's something, and I mean, I'm sorry, everybody's like, ooh, Hell's Angels, but they are, again, every organization has different aspects and personalities involved in it and everything else. But I have never met someone in that organization that was not, the people I met were very honorable, lived by a very strict code, had very high expectations of each other as well as themselves.
Yes.
And would I go out and actively try to piss one off? Absolutely not.
Definitely not.
Absolutely not. But you know your room, right? And they do a lot of volunteer work.
They do. I know they.
There are a lot of things that they do to aid people that is never publicized.
Exactly. And
And
there has even been one case. I mean, I know the most notorious thing, but between those clubs is the unfortunate rivalry between the Hells Angels and the Mongols Motorcycle Club.
yeah,
I mean, they've been at war with each other since the 70s. But a few years ago, the Mongols were going through a whole court case where they were trying to basically ban the use of the vest. Like you couldn't wear it anywhere. Like they could just take it away from you. And that was something like, I think, even if they did have some people that were considered criminals. Not all of them were. And I didn't think that was right. But furthermore, even, word eventually got back to their rivals. And in a very rare twist, they actually, it was only temporarily. It was just only, until this whole court case was over. But they actually gave their support for the Mongols and even sent money to them, to help them battle this court case. So it was one of the very few times where both clubs, they put aside their differences and they were like, you know what, we got to do something about this, and we got to get rid of that policy, because not all of us do the same things that like everyone thinks we do. We wear it because that's just what we're about. So and they eventually won the case. They won.
They should have.
Yeah.
That's one of the things about living here. Everybody's like, oh, y'all are so divided. Oh, y'all just hate each other. Oh, this, oh, that. And it's like, when it comes down to brass tacks, we're Americans, right?
Yes.
And we like to not see injustices. We don't like to see people being, judged. I mean, yeah, that would be a judging.
It would be.
If you're a Hell's Angel, then you are obviously, a hideous person. We're going to take this. And that's just wrong. You don't judge based on anything except experience and history.
One member of that club once said back in the 70s, like, even he was truthful, like, regardless whether he did, whether he was involved in getting in trouble with the law or not, still he remained truthful to the true meaning, saying, don't be judging or convicting people of who they are. Judge and convict them for what they've done. Like, the actual evidence is there.
Well, that's, although sadly, it seems that in large part we are judged by the company we keep. That's not how it's supposed to be.
Right.
And, it's the same is true in the paranormal as well.
Yes.
I have found, because at times it's very cliquish, and depending on things like that. And you go a long way towards helping that situation.
Yes. And believe me, I've had my share of judgment myself. Like, not very much at a lot of the Paracons, because like, even including this one I was just at yesterday, there has never truly been a time that I've had any issue. Like, it's always been a positive experience. Yes, there are.
I think so too.
Yeah, well, I will admit there was, I'm not going to say obviously who it is, but there was one person that was there that unfortunately she's caused problems for me in the past. So I made sure to kind of just walk away and avoid her. Like, just basically focus on those that, Jeremy, I just blocked past her and just only focused on those that I wanted to see. That's what's most important. I mean, unfortunately, the reality is that every now and then you're going to get a bad apple or two at some of these events. And also Joe, who just showed up in the comments.
Yes.
He was at the event yesterday too. So I got to meet up with him. So it was great seeing him in person yesterday.
Don't you just think that one of the very best things about going to a Paracon is getting to put we see faces inanimmately in the photos and stuff, but when you get to see the full animated person, it's just such a gift.
Not only that, it's also special for another good reason. And I know I've talked about this previously, but it's hard to believe now that it's October, in less than a month from now. And everybody knows about this, so I don't even have to really say too much on this. But it's been next month in November will mark the 1-year anniversary of the of what happened to me last year with my brain bleeds that I had.
Yeah.
And these last couple Paracons that I've gone to, not just this one from yesterday, but the last few of them, especially those that I hadn't seen in such a long time.
Yeah.
There were literally investigators, like whether I've seen them before or haven't seen them in person until then, they literally were just running up and like giving me this huge, like a bear hug practically. And it's just, it gets to the point that like it was even emotional for some of them because you could really tell this was not just like, I'm so glad to see you again, or I'm so happy. There's no doubt at all that what I went through almost a year ago, something that truly almost killed me. I think it was really that moment where they were kind of they were sending that message that we thought we were never going to see you again in person. We thought you were not going to make it to 2025. So that also was kind of a one up in my case when I went to some of these Paracons.
Well, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to put it out there, that I knew that I would be talking to you. I mean, I know how horrible and frightening that was.
Yeah.
And I also know that, I mean, realistically, if it's your time, it's your time. It's just one of those things, but I never doubted that you were going to be okay.
Right.
Because I just didn't, and I'm not a psychic. I get premonitions but I'm not I can sit down and read you and I don't even need that $1.99 a minute, baby. I can, it's just a thing, right? But I never, when I was looking at your pictures, when I was reading your posts, when I was talking to you, I never doubted that you were going to be okay. And I'm glad that was right, because the world would be less without you in it. And I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I mean, I said numerous times that had I not survived my ordeal, it truly would have been a worldwide tragedy because there were investigators literally from all over the world that were reaching out, checking in. So, and there was something I hadn't even brought up when I was at, let me see, how you in that situation? I don't know what the TGRU is, something
Through.
like
that would be through. Yeah.
Oh, through, yeah.
Just a typo.
Yeah. When I was at the Rock Island Paracon, they also had, because part of the feature of what they had there was they had the Warrens Museum set up. But before you walked into the, to the museum, but also partially also inside the museum, they had a memorial area for Dan Rivera, who we all know passed away a few months ago. And I looked at that. And of course, obviously, I gave myself a moment of silence, to give the ultimate. And this was it's just like what I was saying when it comes to meeting certain investigators. Sadly, I never got to meet Dan Rivera. I was friends with him on Facebook, but never have. And I only got to speak to him a couple of times through comments, but I never got to truly meet him. So just standing there, giving my most ultimate respect for him was what was very important. But I also couldn't help but shake the fact that, again, if I didn't survive the injuries that I had, there would have been most likely another memorial plaque like that for me in that case. I would have basically shared Dan Rivera's fate, if you will.
Well, but the actual truth of it is that it was simply not your time.
Exactly.
And that's always going to be, it is situational and it is individual. And there are people that have had terrible moments that you would not think they would possibly come through.
Right.
And they did. And then you wonder sometimes how that is when people that also, probably the closest person to me that we've lost in the paranormal field was Scott Gruenwald.
Yes.
He was my friend, period.
Yeah, we had him. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Brilliant. Well, I was just going to say, we had a personal relationship as well as a paranormal relationship. We really were friends. And, and he was one of the, amazingly enough, people never believed me about this, but he was one of the nicest people to meet in the entire field. And if I was having an equipment problem, he was like, oh, just send it. if I was, if I had a question about something, and, we talked Alabama football. I mean, so, there's that, but it was just, and it was a weird friendship because it came out of nowhere, but you do that with almost everybody that you meet.
Exactly.
You are so gregarious. People respond to that, and a lot about the paranormal.
Yes.
You are like a walking encyclopedia of paranormal information.
I was not expecting this yesterday because it was just so random that they asked, but even while I was there, I don't know if I think their names are, there are two siblings, but they're also paranormal investigators themselves. Their last names are Shortridge, like Jennifer and, oh my God, I already forgot the other. I forgot her brother. Oh, it was Jennifer and Joe Shortridge. They run the 222 Paranormal Podcast from Ohio. And I've met them a few times. Most of the time, I usually had seen them at Parapsychon up in Mansfield, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And they were at this event. And of course, not only were they excited to see me once again, but they also offered me to be on their show, during the event, which is not the first time that's happened because I had been interviewed by them last year when we were at the Michigan Paracon. So this was my second time being interviewed, not just on another podcast, but just but at the actual Paracon itself. Now, I know some people here in the chat are going to ask, saying, why didn't I send the link? It was a pre-recorded show. So when it does get released, when you guys do listen to it, we're not ignoring comments or questions or anything like that. It's all pre-recorded.
That's why I hate I will pre-record, but I hate pre-recording.
Yeah,
because if I'm doing it for my schedule, I'm not in chat when it's running, right? If I'm doing it for a guest schedule, that's okay because I'll be in chat. But I hate it because I love when I have people, and I don't want people to think I'm not answering them, right?
Yeah.
So it's just funny. Oh, Tom McNicholas says Scott was a buddy as well to him. He had a wicked sense of humor, no doubt. Yeah, and had him ducking for cover. He was so irreverent. I just loved it.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to have Scott with us at some of the Chicago Ghost conferences. He was a frequent guest, and he always was just joking around a lot of times. And I still remember, like, almost 10 years ago, there was one time he was a speaker at one of our ghost conferences. And, obviously I know some of his speeches and, some of his slideshows were at times a little adult themed. But I always loved what he said because there were always sometimes kids at these things. He would say, this is for all the kids who can't read.
Did he get naked at your event?
No, thank God. I would have walked out myself then.
He did. I was on my way to the Old Paulding jail, and I stopped up in Lexington for Keith Age's event when they had moved it to that conference center.
Yeah.
And so, I was sitting there talking with my friend Mary and some other people that I knew, and went to go find Scott, and he was sitting down for a panel. And I'm like, well, I just wanted to tell you that I'm about to leave. I have to get somewhere, but I love you and I'll talk to you later. And I turned around to, walk away, and turned back around to wave at him. He was naked. And I'm like, God. Dude. But he sat down to do his panel in the nude. I mean, no inhibitions whatsoever, right? And but that was either nude or in a tutu, take your pick. But that was just who he was,
I'm just gonna say, looks like he could have been someone he looks like he could have made a great candidate for the show on the Discovery Channel, Naked and Afraid. I'm just gonna say
he would have been. But it's so funny because years after I knew Scott, I met Rick McCollum.
Yes.
And they look like the Bobbsey twins. And if you'll think about it, they do. People always thought that Rick was Scott and vice versa. And so I was just kind of like, they do. And then I started thinking, I said, well, I guess they do. So you know, what are some of the most interesting people that you have met that were not quite what you expected, but were something a little better?
That's really hard to say because we have met so many investigators out there, and Joe's like, there were way too many stairs. Yeah, there was the YMCA building that they were using for Rock Island. There was a lot of, and also I forgot one other thing. Most importantly, too, is that when we walked in the building, there was no air conditioning, and I had my full uniform. I had a suit
man
on. It was freaking hot.
Man.
Yeah, I mean, there were fans, but that was not enough. It was just like, oh God. And then when we got to like the top portion of the building, it was even worse up there. We only stayed for one. Yeah, we only stayed for one speaker, and that was with funny enough, this was first time for me. I got to meet Ryan Buell and two of the other caretakers of the Warrens Museum Foundation. So, and Tom would say, I'm going to say this for him. He said that while they were speaking, they were mostly staring at him because this was one of those speeches where a lot of people came in and it got to the point there were no seats. And this was like a really small room and there was no fan. So that made it even worse. And at one point, Tom drew attention to himself at one point because his phone goes off while they're talking. It has like a cuckoo text.
Tom.
And then after that, all of a sudden you hear this zzz, zzz, his phone's going off. And I just look over to Tom, I'm like, Tom?
That would happen to me. I'm sorry, Tom.
I was trying my best because, like, even when Ryan Buell and the other two caretakers were talking, like when they were being serious, I was still laughing. I was trying my best not to laugh. I wasn't laughing at them. I was laughing for what Tom did.
The situation.
Yes, Chris.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yes, Chris. Most interesting. The only thing is I don't drink Dos Equis. You remember the Dos Equis commercials?
Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
But to go back to your question, though, again, I can't really think as far as like, because again, I've met so many, but there have been a few others that I was not expecting that this is like what they were like, not saying it in a bad way, but just knowing like how far better they were than to actually be in person. I've had quite the amount of shares, and it's just when you find out that they're even better, like when you're in person with them, right. That's what makes it more powerful. And that was, like I said, that was the case for some of the newer faces that we saw yesterday. Although, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted you to elaborate on yesterday.
Well, there's also one other familiar face that we saw, and this was neither an investigator, guest, or vendor. And I know some people would find it hard to believe, but because the Warrens Foundation Museum, some of them were there, they also brought some of the artifacts that were from the museum, including, of course, the most notorious of them all, Annabelle. Yeah. And that was quite a discovery to find. I mean, quite a discovery because it was like, I guess it was so bad for some of the vendors and guests refused to like even go near it because they just knew how, bad the energy was. And so Tom and I ended up getting tickets to go in. And so we walk in and I'm glad there was, because I realized I had forgotten to bring a crucifix to keep protection around me. But there was a bowl of holy water that was nearby, so we were able to bless ourselves. They also had a priest that was there that was kind of blessing people around just to give additional protection. You had to be in a line. It wasn't just something like you could just walk around or anything like that. So we got to check out some
access of the access would need to be limited in that case.
Yeah, definitely. So and they also had like this religious music that was playing in the background. I mean, just basically trying to put as much religious icons or just that energy around as much as possible. So we get we get closer to Annabelle, and I'm not gonna lie, I was starting to get kind of nervous. Like, you feel that it's like when before you walk in, you're excited. Like, well, not in my case, because I knew this was serious. For some, they're excited. They're having this big thrill that we're going to see the real doll. But as soon as you walk into the room, it's like that excitement, that smile, it all just vanishes very quickly. And I just start feeling this heaviness while we're in the room. And I don't think it was just coming from just Annabelle itself. I think it was coming from all of the artifacts. And the other artifacts were were other types of dolls and stuff. Like some of these were like from like probably some of the lesser known artifacts from the Warrens Museum. Some of them were like originally from South America, Africa, a few also from Europe. Yeah. And some of these, were over, 100 years old, maybe even older. And I didn't even know that to this day, even after long since Ed and Lorraine Warren had passed, that the museum is still receiving supposedly possessed artifacts, because there was an artifact that was there. I don't remember which one it was. Tom took pictures. We were allowed to take pictures. Tom took pictures. Yeah, Tom took pictures, and they had signs that detailed information regarding the artifact. And one of those artifacts was just recently sent to the Warrens Museum back in 2021. So they're still getting it to this day. And one of the most, before we got to Annabelle, one of the most disturbing artifacts they had was another type of doll. And supposedly it had been used, in sacrifices of both humans and animals. And it wasn't just the history of it that made it so dark, but more importantly, that doll actually had a combination of real human and animal teeth. And I was just like, oh my God. And I was like, are you serious?
Did you say teeth?
Teeth. The teeth were either animal or human. And there probably were even other parts of the doll that were made from either animal or human remains. That was kind of creepy, even without the whatever it was used for as far as satanic sacrifices. And then once we got to the actual doll, to Annabelle, first of all, I didn't expect this because, we've seen it in photos. We've seen it in video. And the doll is huge. I mean, it's like 3 feet tall. And it's like, it's in its case. It's on a podium. It's like, it was like a giant shrine that was around it. The shadow
That's an
doll,
interesting juxtaposition, right? That's not what you expect to find in a shrine.
No, you don't. I mean, I'm not saying it was an actual shrine, but it was like.
But I mean, I get that, but it's not how you would expect it to be presented.
No, you don't. I was not expecting that at all. And of course, obvious. I mean, and we knew this was the real case because I know there have been some other Paracons where they say that it was actually taken out, and then it was later found out that it was. Sorry, that was my cat. It was later found out that it was like a fake doll. No, it was not, because it was the real case. We could see the condition of it, and just as soon as we got to it, I just felt like very negative energy around. I think we were able to get some pictures, and I got a picture of myself in front of it. But when you eventually see the photo, you could see that I was not even smiling. I mean, it was a way for two reasons. One was to show the most ultimate respect, but secondly, knowing that this was the real deal. It's not like all the other pictures that I go to these Paracons where I'm always excited. I wasn't my very positive, happy self or anything like that. I was very, very serious. And like I said, we only stayed for about maybe a minute or two. And as we got closer to, I was also reciting the Lord's Prayer to add additional protection. So I could pretty much say, contrary to what some people will think, if you're feeling the negative energy coming from this doll, then this is the real one. If it wasn't the real doll, then I wouldn't have felt anything. And it was, I would probably say, in my personal opinion, that was probably as close as to true evil as we'll ever come across. And I'm glad we didn't stay there for, I mean, we had to keep moving anyway, because again, we were in a line, but I'm glad we were only there for a minute or two, because yes, the doll may be contained. It may have been blessed a lot. There may be a lot of energy, preventing it from attacking, but you really don't know what you're dealing with. Who knows what Annabelle is capable of. So that's why I had to take the most best safety precautions. But here's the chilling part. After we finished seeing her and we walked back out to the main area, a few minutes after that occurred, I started developing a little bit of a headache. And I mean, I wanted to first, I don't know if it was because, again, of the intense heat or something like that, but especially, again, now that I'm kind of more on alert when it comes to headaches or something like that, when I started feeling this one, not a good thing. So that's when I had to leave the building for a couple of minutes and just kind of pray to myself to just try to get any type of protection. Now, I should have gone back and asked one of the priests to bless me, but I couldn't go back in once we left. But that was one of the few times where it was actually really scary. I mean, I could see now also from experience is that I was just telling this with another investigator just earlier today. You walk into a place or you walk into something that you've learned all your life, in this case about Annabelle, and it's intense. It's really scary. Annabelle's truly not something you really want to mess with.
Well, without a doubt.
It is. Like I said, even just approaching her, I just, without, again, even with all the protection, I could just literally, it was just a feeling of evil. And, I could even say now that, yes, I dealt with my share of negative entities, including even one partial attachment for a short period. But now I could say that the other times that I've had such negative entities, encounters, they are definitely nothing compared to what we dealt with Annabelle. I think she was probably the most powerful entity I think we ever encountered. And I'm definitely glad that I kept my prayers going. I was honestly, even Tom doesn't know this, I was honestly nervous of how the ride home was going to be, because, you hear, they said there was that whole story that she was supposedly responsible for like one or two car accidents. So I think one of them was a motorcycle accident. So the entire time that we were riding back, I mean, yeah, we were just being like our typical selves, like when we're being on the road, but deep down, I was being on high alert to make sure that, we made it back home in one piece. And thank God we did.
Well, definitely, thank God, because there's another side of that, which is that you can actually you can be affected to create scenarios from
Yes.
those experiences too. And I want to interrupt myself here to say, Tom and Nicholas, those are hitting my phone. If you'll just put in chat where you're sending them, I'll pull them up. But my watch. They're just coming on my watch. So if you could just let me know. But I have had scenarios where I've gone to investigate a private residence that had an object that they had taken from somewhere, graveyards, whatever. And there was something that was uncomfortable about them. And it hasn't been just one place. One in particular was just a little Native American doll that you get if you visit a reservation, kind of a thing. And the lady was like, I don't even know where this came from. It just showed up in my house. And I said, well, it had to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
Everything comes from somewhere. But, and I got them, but only on my watch time. So if you'll just tell me if they're Facebook or by messenger, by text, then I'll go find them and put them up. But, it's just so weird to me that you'll come across something and you don't know why this is affecting you that way. I mean, if you had not, and this is obviously just we'll never know because you were there. and you did know, but do you feel like you would have been affected by that without knowing her history?
I probably would have. And I think what makes the encounter all the more frightening, and the fact that I did have a little bit of a headache afterwards, I
Mhm.
think she probably somehow made this again. I can't say for sure, but I got a
Right.
feeling. I got a feeling she may have probably somehow found out about my history, like what happened last year, and could have made some type of attempt for me to suffer another brain bleed, like try to send that message that this time you're going to lose. You're not going to be so lucky. But again, thank you. And also what Jill just said to me, I did briefly run back to the entrance there. I couldn't go very far, but I was able to put more holy water after I saw Annabelle, just to add that additional
Yeah.
protection. And in fact, before I go to bed tonight, I do have a bottle of holy water myself, and my mom is going to bless me before we call it a night. And
I think that's
another,
not a bad idea.
yeah, and another important factor, I was just talking with Kate about this on the phone yesterday because I had to talk to her about a couple things. One of the other things you want to make sure not to do, especially when you encounter such a negative entity like that,
Mhm.
is you want to keep your feelings positive. Because if you show any
Yes.
type of negativity, even if you had some kind of blessing, that will give it more power and that'll make you far more vulnerable. And the fact that I was excited of wanting to be at this events, wanting to see everybody, that's what kept the positiveness within me. So if there was anything that could have latched itself onto me, I was making it harder for it to attack because I
Yes.
was keeping that it doesn't like when you're showing that positive. In fact, one of the owners said, if you're able to if you're able to be positive and you live a very successful life with what you're doing, the dark side is going to have a much harder time trying to reach out, trying to get you. That's pretty much what they were
Absolutely.
saying.
Well, I think it's true because positivity wins. I'm sorry. I'm a firm believer in that. And because generally positivity, you know, if you're a positive person, you have a belief system that helps you to maintain that. It's or just an outlook.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And you are one of the most positive people I know. I mean, you do have your moments. Everybody has their
We all
moments,
do.
but that's why, I mean, my dad used to tell me I was way too old to be such a damn Pollyanna, right? But I'd rather be that, right? He's like, you've seen too much, you've had these experiences, and I just can't believe that you're such a Pollyanna. And I'm like, I'm not a Pollyanna, but I do believe that humans are basically good. And I do have faith in my belief system. And I think that if you succumb to negative thinking, then you can be overwhelmed so easily. You have to maintain positivity in everything that you do. And that's not always easy, as you well know. But, I just think that it's a built in protection if that's what you try to manifest within yourself.
That's correct. And that's what I basically work my way up to every time I go out to these type of events. And that's what the whole meaning at times of what some of these most of these paracons is supposed to be about, is having that positivity, like again,
Yeah.
with seeing everybody there, the friendship. And
Yeah.
let's face it too, when it comes to paracons, I mean, they are so much, again, in all my experience of going to these things, they are so much more different than other types of conventions. I mean, what other type of paracons are out there that you forge friendships? They become like family reunions. You
Yes.
just don't see that with other types of conventions, even like something like Comic Con or Anime Con. They don't even do that. I mean, yes, obviously,
Well,
there's like
they're
thousands more.
so big.
They're
Yeah,
so
they're so
big.
big,
There's
it's
like,
really hard to create that.
yeah, and you got like thousands of people that come out to that. I mean, yeah, you might be lucky enough if you could like make a few friendships, but with something like that, they're just way too big. And not to mention, sometimes you got to pay to see these vendors. You know, there's long lines to them. You can't socialize with them. With with Paracons, you can. There's no waiting period. And even if
that's even the big ones.
Yeah, well,
that's the big ones.
That's literally that's what I was about to get to, was like even the big names, like from television, like Ghost Hunters or whatever. Yes, you still have to sometimes pay to get a picture with them, but there's no cost for that. There's no cost for you to just simply have a sit down and chat with them. And that's, in fact, when I was at Michigan Paracon last year, I was not expecting this, but at one point I decided to just head over to the restaurant at the casino, and just because it was around lunch, I wanted to grab something to eat, and so they gave me a seat. Tom wasn't there for this one, so I was the only one that was getting lunch. I was by myself, but I was not expecting where they were going to put me. They put me in a booth right behind the Ghost Hunters team. It's like, geez, what are the chances of that?
Right.
So, and of course, like typical, I didn't want to bother them because I'm sure they probably needed time to themselves. I mean, yes, I still waved and said, hi to them and see you later after they left, but it was still cool to have thinking, wow, in a way, it's like I'm having lunch with these guys.
Yeah. Well, that's why I like, I do UFO cons too, right? And they're very similar in that, but they protect their own air talent a lot more than Paracons do. And, but it's just so interesting because you do have access to people that you would never expect to get a chance to talk to. And I think I like Paracons more, but it's very close on those, because the very first one I ever went to that was UFOs was the very first Alien Con.
Oh, yeah.
And they credentialed me for that. And I was like, really? Yay. But I got to meet the guy Kevin Burns, who created that show and was the producer of it. And, he was so amazing and he was so nice. And we got to sit down and just have a nice conversation, just the two of us sitting there watching the world go by in the middle of the room, kind of a thing. And so I would never have gotten access to that conversation and gotten to know what a cool guy he was without that, without that being the environment, right?
Absolutely.
It's like the Paracons, like you're talking about, it's so neat. I love when I'm somewhere and, like the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash. That's one of my very favorite places to go. And, people will come up because, I always look like this. This is mascara and maybe a little cheek stuff, right? This is what I always look like. So it's so nice because I'll be somewhere and people will come up and they're like, I know you. And I'm like, do you? What's your name? And then we chit chat, and then I've got a friend forever, right? And to me, that's the beauty of cons. I get to talk to, obviously I get to talk to the talent and stuff, but I like talking to people like we do about our different investigative experiences and stuff. I think that's fun. I want to hear what people have found. That's why my show is called, Fate Magazine, but also I do the show Paranormal Experienced because I want to know about your experiences. And I've done that one for 10 years now, right? And it's so much fun.
Well, and I didn't Chris.
I like Chris.
Yeah, he has his way of jokes sometimes with me. He lives all the way out in Colorado. So
okay.
But he's become a very good I've worked with him a few times on some of these shows. He's become a very good, not only is he another investigator, but he's also become another very good friend of mine. But in talks of like when it comes to like what you were talking about, I had no idea about this, but when we went to the Rock Island Paracon yesterday, I mean, it's amazing how far some of these people, yeah, the jump scare too. That's how I first got to meet Chris, was on another podcast I was on with Jeremy, and Chris was sending these jump scares on Twitch. It was a Twitch show. And there was even one time I was trying to wait until because I knew he was going to make another. I'm like, well, this time I'm ready. Well, unfortunately, he changes it to a different sound effect, and I was not expecting that.
That's funny.
But anyways, for the Rock Island, I had no idea about this, but I was talking with, I think it was, and this was my first time meeting her, Ashley Moreno. And yeah, like I said, that was my first time ever I met her. And I think it was her that said that there was not only just people like investigators from like other states, there were some that even came out from other countries to this. I'm like, and I even sit there, I'm like, you're kidding. Because I didn't notice. He said, yeah. And yeah, Ashley, Jeremy, that's correct. Yeah, she was there. So it was just, I found out there were like investigators that came from like, I mean, yes, most of them came from other states. Like we also had Christy London that was there. Like she came all the way out from New York. Someone else from New Jersey. Of course, Joe from Wisconsin. Then some investigators even from Texas, and then Kentucky and Tennessee. And it was so, but in addition, you had also investigators from Canada, from parts of Germany, Italy, Poland, even. Surprisingly, no one from the UK, but just like I had no idea that it gained such international fame. Like I understood that, like with the Michigan Paracon, because that too also attracted international investigators, but I had no idea that even Rock Island did the same exact thing. So that was even a plus. Like I didn't know exactly which investigators, who they were, but I was like, wow, that's awesome. That's great. But yeah, like I said, Jerry, I wanted to surprise you about that. Yeah, it was awesome finally meeting Ashley in person. She's great.
That's fun though.
Ashley's from Ohio. Again, another state ad. She came all the way out from Ohio for this. So and Renee, there was also another investigator by the name of Renee. She came all the way out from Michigan. So it was just, and even I even found out other people from Chicago even came out. It was all over the place. Of course, people from Iowa near That
is so cool.
Yeah, like right on the border, because that's where Rock Island is. So they were absolutely everywhere.
That's one thing that I find, we just had a Paracon here in Alabama in Ozark, and I wasn't able to get to it. I got invited to come down, but I was in the middle of another project. I couldn't do that. But, we don't have very many around here at all. I've gone to the Pensacola Paracon. I've been to the one that was in Atlanta once, but that's really not a lot of, there's not many. And the ones that we have in Alabama tend to not have a second time.
See, I'm really surprised by that a lot of the deep southern,
because we have a lot of hauntings here.
That's what I mean. I'm really surprised, especially because I would have thought that the deep south would have had the most Paracons than like even in our area. I think
our states are too big.
Yeah,
it's too far to go. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't really understand it either because, the one in Atlanta was big, but they're few and far between.
Yeah, like I knew that the only southern states that I really knew that really hosted like any type of Paracons in general were either like Tennessee or Georgia. But yet you don't really see much like in some of the other, like in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, even Florida doesn't do as much. I'm even more surprised the Carolinas don't, because they're part of the 13 colonies. I was speaking with an investigator from South Carolina a few months ago, and she has always dreamt of wanting to have a Paracon, and she lives right on the border area of like right on the South Carolina, Georgia border. Right. And they, well, and it's true too, what Jeremy said. I get it. It's also the Bible Belt. So I totally understand. That might be part of the reason. why there's just not that many Paracons, but
But
still.
we still paint our porch roofs blue.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we do. We know they're there. So,
It's funny. The deep south, in addition to the deep south, I mean, most people don't know this, but even though I live in Illinois, in the very southern part of the state, that actually is kind of considered part of the Bible Belt too, because unlike over here in Chicago, living in the suburbs and stuff like that, the lifestyle in the southern part of the state is far different because it's more farmland, it's more rural areas and stuff. And they even down there, they have they even have their own southern accent down there. And unfortunately, I mean,
I
I'm
bet
not
they couldn't understand mine.
yeah, well, unfortunately, and I'm not saying we're all like this, but believe it or not, Southern Illinois has a much older history than Northern Illinois does. Like some of their history goes back to the 1700s, even before Illinois ever became a state. Illinois didn't become a state until 1818. And just a few years ago, we just had the 200th anniversary of the state. But, unfortunately, not everybody always likes that we're from Chicago and vice. There's just been kind of a bitter rivalry between us Northern and Southern Illinoisans because of the cultural differences and stuff. But because the Southern Illinois people live a different lifestyle, they consider themselves also part of the Bible Belt as well. So, that would also.
Are there a lot of Amish there or something?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I've never been fully directly down. The furthest I've ever gone south was down in the town of Alton, Illinois. Actually, Alton is kind of the rare exception because that's considered one of the most, everybody knows that's like one of the most haunted small towns in America. So that's the rare exception. But if you go further down to like where Carbondale is, that's where Southern Illinois University is located. You're not going to find, I mean, they're just like, again, in the deep southern states, there are a lot of hauntings and even a lot of cryptid activity down there, but they just don't do very many Paracons down there. And I get it. Again, it's more rural. I mean, Carbondale has been in some way kind of considered Southern Illinois' version of Chicago, even though it's a lot more smaller in that area. But, the closest I've ever seen them really actually hold something was not too far from Carbondale is also the town of Murphysboro. And back in the early 70s, they actually had their own, pretty much not just the southern, pretty much, I would say Illinois' own version of Bigfoot. They had something that was called the Big Muddy Monster or the Murphysboro Mud Monster, which, again, it was either like some type of Bigfoot swamp monster or a skunk ape type creature. It was only cited for just a short amount of time. It's supposedly the earliest sighting of the Big Muddy Monster really went back as far as 1957. And but it didn't really, that was when it was still it was near a housing project. I don't remember how the story went, but sightings of it really didn't start until about 1972 or really till about June of 1973. And for 2 weeks, there were constant sightings before the sightings just ended altogether. There were a few more sightings that did occur throughout different parts of the 70s, but the last reported sighting of the Big Muddy Monster was back in 1989. Since then, at least as far as I know, there hasn't been any sighting since. Again, maybe there has been. I don't really know, but
That's interesting.
Yeah, about 2 years ago, for the first time ever, they had, much like they do in Point Pleasant, West Virginia with the Mothman Festival, they had the first ever Murphysboro Mud Monster Festival. Now, there was a secondary event that was also called that, but the difference was this cryptid became such an icon for Murphysboro that they actually created their own beer brand with the monster on it. So you can actually get, I think it's like called Big Muddy. I don't remember what it was fully called, but that was just kind of a beer. That was just kind of a beer fest they would have. But even though it was a beer fest, yes, you had to be 21 and over. Still, they had a family section, for like those under 21, particularly for kids. And they actually would have a guy dressed up as the monster. That was the closest they would ever get to like having something involving the actual monster itself. But when they did this 2 years ago, this was the actual Cryptid Con. And not only did they have this convention, which I think they had it again earlier this year, back in June. Unfortunately, we couldn't have made it to that because to get from northern to that part of southern Illinois, that's a good 6.5, 7 hour drive to get to that part of the
Right.
state. So I don't know if you know Chad Lewis. He's been there quite a few times at this event. And if you go to Murfreesboro today, just again, like they do in Point Pleasant, they have made a full 8-foot tall statue of the monster based on the descriptions and reports. And it is in that walking position, like you see with the Patterson Gimlin film. And they've even made like 2 painted murals featuring the monster on some of the buildings. So it seems almost as if Murfreesboro is trying to get that same recognition like you'd see with Point Pleasant, West Virginia, or Falk, Arkansas, or like some of the Pacific Northwestern areas, like where Bigfoot is spotted. So it's like they're trying to join in the game, if you will.
Well, I know that it'd be tough to beat Mount Pleasant as far as their um, promotion of that. But one of the things that I find fascinating, I did not know this. I've driven back and forth between Birmingham and our Gulf Coast all my life. I stopped off with my grandsons in a town called Evergreen, and it's about an hour south of Montgomery, Alabama. And so just hopped off to grab some lunch and fill the car up and stuff. And as I'm turning into where the Wendy's and Zaxby's and all those places are, there's a Bigfoot in front of the sign for the little shopping center. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Why is there a Bigfoot? And so I stopped and read the sign. It said, Evergreen, Alabama, Bigfoot capital of the South. And I was like, that is new, because I have always thought that like our Talapisa Forest was where most of our Bigfoot sightings were. The investigators that I know in Alabama focus there, right?
Right.
So I was like, well, are we sure if we're this far south that it's not a skunk cave? Because they're in northern Florida and stuff like that. So in southern Georgia. So I started researching it and I started talking to some people from down there. I have a cousin that I found out recently. She found me on Facebook. So, from her ancestry list of people. That was cool. And we actually look alike and sound alike. It's a lot of fun. But so I was like, what do you know about this? And she's like, nothing. I got nothing, But so that's something that I'm working on, because do I want to go and find Bigfoot? Not just no. Okay. But do I want to learn more about it? Absolutely I do. Because I know a lot of the people researching here.
Right.
And, one of my friends she's about 20 years older than me and grew up here. She's native and just an amazing human. But she was telling me that the area that's very grown up now, and as far as people living there, it's a very desirable area to build and live in. But when she lived there wasn't anybody, right? Because that was like 70 years ago. And she said that Bigfoots were just part of their community. And I said, what? And she said, well, yeah, I mean, you didn't go out and interact with them, but you would see them because it was all wooded. They were a Native American community, and they just interacted, I guess, like, not like bears, because they weren't, going to eat you, but they were, I guess, kind of like, almost like cousins that couldn't speak, right? Or something like that. But I just thought that was so fascinating, because I can't imagine sitting outside with my family on the front porch after dinner, and Bigfoot and his kids and wife just walked through the yard, right?
Right. Well, and when you
That
look, oh, I'm sorry,
would
go
blow
ahead.
your mind. No, I mean, it would just blow your mind.
Well, and when you look at a case like this, like that happened down in Murfreesboro back in June of 1973,
Yeah.
you would never expect that you would find a Bigfoot type creature living in that area. So, like, and the reason why it's also called, just to be clear, why it's called the Big Muddy Monster, it's not just because of its muddy appearance. We actually have a river in that part of the state that's called the Big Muddy River. It's a tribute to the Mississippi River. And the
Right.
Big Muddy River, it runs just outside of Murfreesboro. You know, it's a pretty big river. It constantly reaches flood stage, unfortunately. But like, and again, not even just the time period of where they would see something like this, but again, it just seemed so out of place. Because
Right.
before that, even if you did have a lot of Bigfoot believers back then, you would either mostly associate that either in the Pacific Northwest or parts of the South, because
Mhm.
that's where most of the Bigfoot reports and skunk apes, in this case, for the South, that's where most of the reports came from. So,
Mhm.
like, when people would hear something like that in the state of Illinois, not just in the southern, but just anywhere in general, it's like, even if you believe, it's like, that can't be. They're usually seen in these states. What is a Bigfoot doing here in Illinois? So it probably blew a lot of people's minds back then.
Well, I think probably they're like white-tailed deer or something, right?
It's possible.
Because they're in the Pacific Northwest, particularly Oregon, Washington State. You know, I have friends that are part of that Olympic project where, yeah, that is Bigfoot research. And I, I mean, they don't see them like that. Like they're not interactive. They're not traveling in family units, that kind of thing, right?
Right,
But
right.
they tend to be solo experiences. But here, there's um, there's some of both, right? Solo and multiple creature interactions, which I wouldn't be comfortable. I wouldn't be comfortable with either one.
Right.
But right, just
Well,
they're big.
another thing that should be noted is when this creature was sighted over 50 years ago, it also did have a lot of differences compared to the typical Bigfoot or skunk ape. I mean, to give you some description of it, is that it's like I said, it seems to be some type of Bigfoot, swamp monster, or a skunk ape type creature, anywhere from 7 feet to 9 feet tall. It's got a very
Huge.
probably about 300 to 400 pounds, very muscular in appearance, and it's obviously unlike the typical Bigfoot. This was known to be seen near the Big Muddy River, so that's where it has kind of the skunk ape like qualities to it, and the creature also had like a terrible odor. Again, another trait that was often one witness described as like between a skunk, like rotten eggs and a skunk. And most people could never actually see. And also, its fur too, its hair that it was covered. Unlike it was far different. Unlike other types of colors we associate Bigfoot with, this was actually covered in long white but dirty, very dirty and muddy white hair, and which is something you normally don't hear again, because you hear all the other reports either black, brown, reddish, even ginger. You don't really
Right.
hear, or gray. You don't really hear very often of them being white. So
No, that would definitely be a skunk ape.
that's what I was going to do. Some type of the only other guess I could think of is, could it be some type of Bigfoot or skunk ape that may be suffering like albinism? Is it an albino one, which would explain why it has white hair? But also, like I said, it's covered with like mud, river slime, branches, twigs, leaves, rocks.
Well, it lives outside.
Yeah, well,
I
not
mean,
only just, I think there might be another reason why it's all covered, not just because it's outside. Let's face it, like when you look at certain types of animals out there, like when it comes to mating season or something like that, and like certain, like it's hard to describe, like fur color or skin color or something like that. most like both genders of the same
Mhm.
creature are so accustomed to finding a mate like that. When they see
Mhm.
something different, like you know the old the old term of being the black sheep of the family,
Yeah.
that usually stands out from everything else. In the case with what might be an albino Bigfoot, if it was trying to look for a mate, it was not probably considered attractive to the other
Oh,
species.
I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
That's very smart.
So in order for it to kind of blend in, it probably, rolled around or covered itself with all this mud to make it look like it was one of the others. Like it looked
Make
like
it
it was brown.
self-attractive as a mate.
Yeah, and make it look like its fur was brown, not actually white. So that's just a theory. I can't say for sure. But the other thing too, and
As good
that's
as anything else out there.
exactly, and that's another feature about this creature too, is most witnesses who reported seeing this creature, they said they could never actually see its face because it was caked in mud. Although they did say, and not just only at night, even a few reports during the day. Yeah, camouflage, maybe that could be another
Mhm.
possibility. But the
Yeah.
other thing too was that although most people could never see its face, they did report saying that it did have glowing red eyes, and also some people also reported seeing yellow teeth, by its mouth. Those are the only two facial features that most people had said that they remember seeing, and again, kind of similar to the skunk ape, and also even like something like the Falk monster, for example. There was also reports of people who were out near the river area that were either walking, jogging, parked nearby, fishing, or living by the area, and they would hear or see the creature, and it usually was in an aggressive situation where it became a major vocal point for a lot of the studies. I mean, the best way I can say is the big money monster basically kind of fits mold into the Bigfoot, big hairy creature with long arms, muscular
Mhm.
tone, shuffling gait, except that it's said to be ape-like. It's said to have more like ape-like qualities. I mean, this creature seems to be more about violence, about territory, about aggression, and not so much of the typical primate tendencies that we would see from some other areas. So
Oh,
even
primates
cryptozoology,
are very territorial, though.
yeah, it is. In fact, I mean, I'm keeping it real short. The first sign, like the first sign that really started all, like I said, happened on June 25th of 1973. Yeah, this is kind of a somewhat funny story. You'll understand why. But it was with your typical lover's lane story, because
Oh dear. Yeah.
you had 19-year-old Randy Needham and 28-year-old Judy Johnson, meeting up late at night, midnight around June 25th, June 26th of 73. And who knows what they're doing there. And here's the craziest thing.
Sparking.
Well, and here's the craziest thing. Both of them, they were actually married, but not to each other. So they were out
Oh
having
dear.
an affair. And so, but as their rendezvous or whatever is going on, they start hearing this extremely loud noise out near the river. And before they know it, they saw this huge, massive figure emerge from the river. They had no idea what this thing was. I mean, again, they said it was about 7 feet tall, 7 to 9 feet tall, weigh about 400 pounds. And it just stank. It just had this horrible odor to it. And it's coming right towards them. And they also said the eyes just glowed an eerie red to them. Of course, they immediately got out of there as quickly as they could, and they were going to notify the sheriff and the authorities about it. But how, unlike other cases, how are you going to be able to explain this? Because, they're going out
Yeah.
on an affair. So like this, they know this would this would go public immediately. They just decided that they were just going to go to the police station. They told them what they encountered, and that they said that something's out there and it needs to be dealt with. So the police
Right.
they ended up going back to the it was near Riverside Park. They went back to the park area and they found these huge footprints that were like over a foot long. And all of a sudden they hear this huge bellowing roar, and it scared them so bad that both officers ran off. In fact, one of them dropped his gun and he didn't even want to go back for it. and they returned back later that night, like around 3 a.m. or so, with 2 more officers. And surprisingly, Randy Needham returned with them, and they found even more of these giant footprints, which they also made a cast out of. And they could start hearing splashing from the river, and they could hear that roar, this bone-chilling scream once again. They just went back into their cars. I don't know why they didn't, but they didn't even drive away. They just waited until the sun rose up, and that's when they were actually able to go back and investigate. And the one officer was able to get his gun back. And that's the one sign that's the one sign that really started on. Then next 2 weeks, it was just like pure chaos with this monster that they were seeing.
That's crazy.
I mean, it's just one of those things that you see with some other cryptids, but I'm really surprised they hadn't made a movie. There's been a book about it since. Chad Lewis wrote a book, and but yeah, it's just one of those things that you would just think it's so out of the ordinary for such a state like Illinois to have something like that. And even cryptozoologist Lauren Coleman later investigated it, and he said even he noted back then the differences between the Pacific Northwestern counterparts of this creature. They say that this one is just so out of place, but also more importantly, just the behavior it showed was far more aggressive than what you saw in the Pacific Northwest, like, California, Oregon, Washington State, Alaska.
California, Oregon. I mean, Washington State. What all do they grow there?
Exactly.
They're mellow, right?
Well, and they got a lot of mountains over. I mean, such an area like that would be perfect for an unknown creature to hide. But for Southern Illinois, I mean, yeah, there's no
mountains there, are there?
There's no mountains. There are a lot of farm fields, and there are some. There's actually a lot of forest regions too. I mean, not mountain-wise, but there's actually an area that's called Shawnee National Forest, and that was also one of the areas where some of these reports were coming from, along with other type of cryptid activity. And it's funny, a few years ago, I saw a commercial regarding, like, kind of one of those commercials saying, visit Shawnee National Park. Well, here's the crazy part. The locals that live down there, they say that's an area that most people tend to avoid because of all the activity and that's also one other thing I forgot to mention about when we were talking about the Bible Belt. Like, even though Southern Illinois is considered, there's also another reason why Southern Illinois is also considered part of the Bible Belt, is that most people don't know this, but the crescent of Illinois has actually, including where Alton is located, has long been referred to as Little Egypt. And the reason for that is anybody who reads the Bible attentively knows very well that Egypt does not get good press. It's a region of darkness and superstition and oppression, and a lot of the things that have occurred down in that part of the state for centuries, it's pretty much true to what's been read in the Bible with Egypt. In fact, even the southernmost town, it is called Cairo, named after the city in Egypt.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Cairo, I'm just going to say, sadly, it's a historic town. Sadly, it's fallen apart. I think it's starting to slow a ghost town because of a lot of different reasons. It would take me a while to explain everything. But even more surprised, I didn't expect, and I'm not trying to make this sound weird, but surprisingly, Cairo is actually a mostly black populated town. The vast majority is African American. It has quite a history with it. That's the reason why. But in spite of that, probably the only town, I think, in that part of the state that has the majority of it. But like I said, just a lot of the buildings there have been closed up. They've been boarded up, abandoned. Some of them have been demolished. It's sad because it's like, you see, when you look at its history, you can see that Cairo was such a nice town back in its day.
That happens so often.
And that was,
and it is tragic.
It is. Well, and the reason, I'll throw this out. Part of the reason why, even still today, that there's still a major African American population in the town is because in its early days, like we all know throughout history, Cairo was one of the towns where the Great Migration occurred. A lot of African Americans moved to the north. Cairo was one of them. And that became one of the few towns, especially in that part of the state, where for a long time it was racially mixed. So you had blacks and whites living together. Unfortunately, yes, you still had the racial tensions, which did escalate in violence, but it was definitely not like what it was in some other areas. But just seeing exactly, aside from that, just knowing what the town had gone through, and it just seems like there was so much potential for it that it could really be quite a town full of history, and it's just not living up to it because so many of the buildings have been torn down, and some of them are just the ones that are still there are just falling apart. In fact, another feature about Cairo is that's actually the one town where both the Ohio River and Mississippi River meets. That's the only, yeah, I mean, unless you're on the corner part of Kentucky or Missouri, that part of Illinois and Cairo, that's the only spot that you could see truly both the Ohio and Mississippi rivers meet.
That seems odd that would not be more of a trading area, like have evolved from being a trading area into being a larger metropolitan thing.
Yeah, I mean, I know the residents down there are still trying their best of trying, like, even though they've lost a lot of their historic buildings, a lot of them have often said, you know, if they work hard enough, they're still trying to give a go at it. They're not giving up on the town. But, you know, unfortunately, it's with the economic problems and just the kind of not necessarily poverty. I don't want to say that, but just the poor conditions and stuff. Cairo would have to go through a lot of repairs to become the town that it used to be, because there is so much that's just fallen apart. And it's sad to see that. And again, that's the southernmost town in the entire state. And when I first learned about Cairo, that is something I had never known before. It's like, seriously, like our southernmost town is like that? I've never even been to Cairo. So it's just beyond, it just blew my mind that it was in just such bad condition. And I just couldn't help but think to myself, again, when I looked at whatever was there, I just thought, oh man, like, again, as far as Paracons are concerned, that probably would have even been a good spot for a Paracon, because it's like at the tri-state area, because you could have people from Kentucky, from people from Missouri, Indiana, other parts of Illinois coming down.
Wow, that's a great point.
And not to mention, again, with a vast majority African-American population, that would also be probably, I could almost see it as being like one of the most diverse Paracons to ever be put together, because we've never really had a Paracon that's like a majority African-American population, like investigating groups. So it just seemed like it had so much potential. It's just sad just to see the way how things are going down there. Cairo was also one of the spots where Murphy's The Big Money Monster was also spotted at one point. So it's had its share. Yeah, it's had its share of like some paranormal and cryptid activity.
So you could do a paranormal cryptid.
Yeah, exactly.
Convention.
That would have been nice.
That seems like, yeah.
I could just say for right now, as far as the actual fate of the town, I really don't know what's going to happen. I really would hate to see it go. If residents, you know, are just going to give up, just pack up and leave, I really would hate to see that. But I do agree with some of the residents that they say that they are trying their best of saving the town.
Well, maybe that would be, like I said, Evergreen has started billing itself as the Bigfoot capital of the South, right? So maybe they could, the powers that be, whatever are there, could rebrand.
It's very likely.
I mean, and you know, like you said, it would be a perfect place for a Paracon. It's got a big draw. That would be something to pitch to a city council, right?
Yeah. I mean, at one point earlier this year,
why not?
I even suggested Jeremy that we should go down to Cairo, but not just Cairo, throughout a good portion of the southern part of the state, for a good reason. Earlier this year, back in March, this year marked the 100th anniversary. I probably may have said this before, but I'll bring it up again. This year marked the 100th anniversary of the deadliest tornado, not just in Illinois, but in American history. That was the Great Tri-State Tornado of 1925. Nearly 700 people were killed by this single tornado. And I did a Nick Files episode to, basically to represent, to pay tribute and, represent the 100th anniversary of this tragic twist, this tragic event, not just for that state, but also for southern Missouri and Indiana, because that's where the tornado also, it crossed through 3 states. It still holds the record to the state for having the longest track of any tornado. And so when I was doing the slideshow, Jeremy took interest in what I was covering. And he asked me to send an entire list of all the towns that the tornado struck. And I did that, but I not only just, and funny enough, one of the hardest hit towns, it was a town I just mentioned, believe it or not, was Murfreesboro. Murfreesboro was also one of the hardest hits, along with DeSoto. In fact, Murfreesboro to this day, unfortunately, still, again, another big record. It holds the record for the most tornadic deaths in any single town in U.S. history.
Wow.
So that's why, again, like I said, it's had its share. So I sent the list to Jeremy of all the towns that were hit, but I also sent the towns that they were not necessarily hit by the tornado, but some of the victims are buried in their cemeteries, or towns that they weren't hit, but they were very close to getting hit by, like that. Just the tornado just missed like by 2 miles or so. And then there was also some towns that the tornado didn't go through at all, but the supercell that produced it passed over the town. And again, some of the victims were also sent to those towns. And Cairo was not one of the towns that was hit, but that was where some of the victims were sent, in the recovery efforts of this tornado. So I was really hoping that we were going to head down there this year, but unfortunately we didn't. So, Chris, but at least I sent him the list, and he, maybe next year we'll have the opportunity. There's a lot to investigate there, no doubt. And I kind of did an online investigation. I'm actually getting goosebumps just thinking about this right now. When I was putting the slideshow of the tri-state tornado together, there was a new book that had recently just came out, again, representing the 100th anniversary of the tri-state tornado. And the person that wrote this book, she had an entire website dedicated to this. She really went above and beyond of not just, there was even some paranormal mixed in with it, because her website was also paranormal themed, but she went above and beyond, not just to investigate paranormal wise. She was actually trying to retrace the path of where this tornado went through in southern Illinois. I mean, again, she couldn't do the entire path. Right. This tornado supposedly was 219 miles. We've now discovered that it may have actually been 10 or 15 miles longer than that.
So that's on the ground that far?
On the ground, yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So if it was 10 or 15 miles longer than that, that means that it would bring the total length to 234 miles from southern Missouri to southern Indiana.
Holy crap.
So the author that was she knew she was not going to be able to cover the entire 234-mile path. She was only able to do that throughout the southern part of Illinois. And she had found evidence of certain areas where there used to be farmhouses and stuff like that are just farm fields that have been gone. But that's not the only part. This was the part that shot. I mean, this almost brought me to tears once I saw this, what she found. She had a team of other investigators that was I don't remember which part of the state they were in, but they said that there was an area supposedly where it was an area where the tornado hit. She didn't want to go in because it was mostly forest and there were bugs and stuff like that. So she was going to wait by the car. The rest of her team was going to go out and check it out for themselves. And then just a few minutes later, one of the team members literally runs out of the woods and they're like, you got to come over here right now. You got to see this. It's urgent and it's very important. You're not going to believe this. So this time she reluctantly goes in. They go into the woods. And they took pictures of this. I should have added it to the slideshow. They had found a foundation and a little staircase, and then they started finding other foundations. I'm looking at this oh my God, this is actual damage from the tri-state tornado that is still there a century later. And again, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about
it. Nobody went back.
I mean,
to clean it up.
You look at if you ever look it up, when you do, there's so many photographs of the aftermath of this tornado, and there's even film footage of the aftermath too, which you could find on YouTube. It's not that difficult to find. And
Okay.
just like when you watch the photos, and I mean when you watch the footage and look at the photos, I mean the destruction to the infrastructure of many of these towns that were hit by the tornado was just absolutely unbelievable. And it's still hard to believe that even 100 years later, you could still see and find leftovers from the destruction of the tri-state tornado. And at least one or two towns were truly wiped off the map. Like there was a town that was called Parrish in southern Illinois. That was once a town of like over a couple hundred people. There were 40 buildings. When the tornado struck, it destroyed almost everything except 2 buildings, and the town was never even rebuilt. You go there, so if you go there today, you won't find much. And 22 people alone in that town were killed. So you just go and it's just open country. But I always thought to myself, even if there's nothing there left, what are the chances of getting like the EVPs and stuff like that?
Absolutely.
And this person also went to like where Parrish used to stand, because before this, I had never seen any pictures of like where Parrish used to stand. And she went to the area, and I couldn't believe that she took pictures and found the actual area of where the town used to be. You go there today, it's not just farmland. It's all forest area now too. The entire area has been reclaimed by nature. And again, the activity, just imagine the amount of what happened there a century ago. That I'm not trying to do this for a thrill, but that is something I would love to investigate at some point, just to get the typical answers from a town a town that was truly wiped off the map, that was never rebuilt.
You know, it's almost mind-boggling, right? That happens. We have, I'm in a tornado-prone area here too, and I can fathom that happening, but because we have areas of Birmingham that have incredible things removed, but I cannot even imagine what an EVP session there might be like, because it would have been such a shock.
Yeah.
For one thing, that there may actually be spirits who are wandering around looking for home, right?
That's right.
I mean, that happens. It might be possible to actually help to release someone, or just let them know, it's just gone.
Right. And not to mention, they did, as you would imagine, they did have some commemorations for this event earlier this year, because the actual day was March 18th. It happened March 18th, 1925. And my mom and I, not just myself, even my mom, we would have loved to have gone down to Murfreesboro and DeSoto to pay our most ultimate respects. But again, it's a 6.5, 7-hour drive to get down there. And we just didn't have time of getting down there. But they did have some live streaming. So thankfully we were able to see that at least. And I mean, yes, for such a memorial like this, pretty much most, if not all, of the survivors from this tornado have all since passed away. Good night, Tom. Most, if not all, have since passed away. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of the residents that were at the event were not only just residents that grew up listening to it. There's no doubt in my mind that some of them were probably even descendants, the grandkids and great grandkids. But you can't help but wonder just if there are spirits, still lingering throughout the area of these towns, knowing that
sudden death. I mean,
and knowing that it's been a century now since it all happened, you kind of wonder, like, are they somewhat aware that we're putting these memorials together, in their honor? Because 695 people's lives were taken on that day on March. In fact, not just on that day. The last victim it claimed was in January of 1926. So there were still
Wow.
deaths that occurred even the following months, even almost a year later. And it just stopped everything for them, and some of these towns were huge mining towns, like coal mining was the biggest, like the best job, especially for men, that you can get in that part of the state. Not like what we would have had up here in Chicago. That was your best pay job that you had.
Right.
And to make matters even worse and more heartbreaking, that when this tornado struck, tragically, most of the victims were women and children because the men were minors. They were down in the mines. They were the only ones that were truly safe. And can you imagine, imagine this. Imagine if you were a miner, you go down, you start up your day, you start your shift with the other miners, you go deep underground. Then all of a sudden the power goes out and you hear this noise right above that you first essentially think maybe it's an earthquake or something, but the ground is, aside from the top, the rest of the earth is not shaking. Then you go back up to the mine to see, what the hell happened? Why did the power go out? And you go out and you just see like utter devastation. You're just like, what happened here? And even more heartbreakingly, later finding out that your entire family died. Not just your home, but you lost your family. And so again, imagine again, if there are any of the mines that are still in existence today, the activity that must be coming from those mines, it's got to be mind-boggling, like screams, like people the miners realizing that their entire lives were completely taken away that day. They lost everything and everyone.
We talk about how devastating that must be for them. And it's really, I don't think we can really comprehend that.
No,
I mean, it's absolutely one of those things that, we, not on that level. We've had tornadoes here that obviously were in that area, but there was one instance where a child was taken out of her bedroom and they found her laying on a mattress looking like she was asleep.
Oh, wow.
Dead, right?
I've heard of stories like
in
that.
the yard. And that was just like, how do you get past that? Right. And so it would be really interesting to find out what you would get. My only fear would be if they didn't realize, the spirits just didn't realize they were still like going to work, like happens sometimes.
Right.
With investigations. And then, if they didn't know and you made them aware, what would the reaction be?
Exactly.
Right?
And not only just that, just knowing that you probably would also be entering a very depressed atmosphere too, because again, just knowing what happened a century. And also, I have a documentary just right over here on this bookshelf here. I got a lot of weather documentaries over here, but I do have one on the tri-state tornado. And this was filmed back in the late 90s. So at that time, there were still a few survivors that were still alive that were interviewed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I have interviews of actual survivors from this tape. And it's not just a matter of just the sad and devastating atmosphere that they experience. It was even just the burials that were like in one of the other towns. There was a story where an undertaker collapsed from his lunch. He had been burying tornado victims for 36 hours straight. And the way how most burials, they definitely never did it the way like we do burials now. They said, one survivor said that they would go out to the grave, they would go out to the graveyard and there would be several graves open, but instead of having individual ones, they were like big family-sized graves. One grave would bury three, the dad, the mother, and the child all together, instead of just having a single one. And like I said, they didn't do it the way like we do it now, because especially for such a tragedy like that, there was so many of them. Like, how do you deal with hundreds of people that you got to bury? Like, it's one thing if you have to bury a few of them, but something in the hundreds, it's just like, it's not even just a matter of thinking like they better pay me extra.
The logistics. The actual logistics. You don't have coffins on hand. You probably, the mercantile stores and lumber mills and stuff were taken out too. So you don't have a way to do that even, right?
Right.
And yet they don't have refrigeration and stuff at that point. So, it's just absolutely. And Chris says like Galveston. It
Yes.
is. It's
Galveston
very
Hurricane.
much like Galveston.
I did
But,
Chris was part of that. In fact, in addition to that one, just about almost a month ago now, I also did a special presentation on the Galveston hurricane because this year marked the 125th anniversary of this one. And don't get me wrong, that is still considered to this day as the worst natural disaster in U.S. history. That's true. For the tri-state tornado, yes, not as many people were killed, but it's still the deadliest single tornado.
Yes.
So there's a big difference. But I've often said for both
it's
of
just
these,
a different cause.
It amazes me that for those two tragic events, again, not just only from the paranormal side of things, I said this to Chris. I said, I'm really surprised that for both events that they haven't even made a movie on either one of those kids, like the same way like we did with Titanic or something like that. Like, I'm surprised they've never made movies on these two tragic cases, because I think these are stories that should be told, and not by the parent. It doesn't have to be by the paranormal aspect of it. Just without it was a moment. They were tragic moments in our country's history, whether you want to believe it or not.
But people don't, in large part, people don't want to revisit those moments.
That's true. I mean,
and there's also not really survivors to speak for them.
Right.
Either.
Well, not to mention, I mean, we actually saw a presentation of another historic. This didn't happen here in the States. It actually happened up in Canada, called the Halifax explosion that occurred in 1917. Yeah. And the person that was presenting that was almost 10 years ago. We went for the 100th anniversary for it. They had a presentation right here, so we didn't have to go to Canada for it. But somebody did once ask, like, how come there had never been a movie made for the Halifax explosion, like the same way like they did with Titanic? And I don't remember her name. The presenter that the speaker that presented, she said, I think the reason why they never wanted to make a movie about Halifax, and it could be the same too for the tri-state and Galveston, is that a lot of this, like you said, she simply said that the survivors, prior to their deaths, they probably just simply didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to relive it, because even if it had been almost a century since then, it's no different than like when you talk with war survivors, like, from World War II or Vietnam or any of that stuff. Yes, many years and decades may have passed, but that memory haunts them to, up until their dying days. It never goes away. So who's to say in the case for such tragedies like this that, they didn't, even if decades had passed, they didn't want to talk about or anything. You might have a few that were willing to talk about. Not everybody did. And, if there was a movie to ever be made about, they want to make sure that they're going to stick it to the entire true story, not make up, like some type of fictional storyline like they did with Titanic. I'm not saying it is fiction, but just the love story aspect of it. I think in those cases, they want to actually keep it to the real story of what they went through, over 100 years ago.
People, in my experience, people can't hold on to that.
Yes.
People, I mean, if something hurts that much, it's very hard to, even later, it's very hard to be able to share and revisit it, because you have to kind of set boundaries around it in order to continue living.
Exactly.
And I think that probably that would be the answer to why there's not, you don't hear a lot of stuff about Katrina.
No, you don't. And I still remember when that happened.
So, Katrina was a bear. And, it's just one of those things. The Anaheim earthquakes, right?
Yes.
That's not been that long ago, longer than Katrina, but not that long ago. You don't hear very much about that either
Right.
because
Right.
there was such, you know, we all watched those bridges collapse on top of cars
Yeah.
and fall into the ocean
Another thing I
and,
could.
all of
No,
that
go ahead. Go
stuff.
ahead. I'm sorry.
But
No,
you just don't, every so often you'll come across somebody who is like, yeah, show me the money, right?
yeah. Yeah.
But as a general rule, in my experience, people who have experienced severe tragedies and trauma like that don't want to cope with it. And Chris says, do you think tragedy, the aura of it, can pass through generations? I think it can become a generational wound.
I think so too. That's that's
So,
that's how I should have probably said it when I was talking about some of these, like Galveston or some of the towns in southern Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana that were hit by the tri-state tornado. Just the aura in general, like it's got to still be there
yeah,
even after a century when this all occurred. And that is, again, I think an important factor of what may still remain. Yes, aside from like the town of Parrish, the towns have since, have been rebuilt since, but regardless of the fact, it still leaves that mark on the
yeah,
town. And in some varying degree, like I said, when that author was going out to some of these towns trying to look for these, former areas like where parts of the town used to be, or like where
mhm,
Parish used to be, or where farmhouses, just simple farmhouses used to be,
yeah,
you can't help, even just looking at the photos, you could still feel part of that aura there, just knowing like, yes, today it's nothing but beautiful farmland, but you just can't help but realize that somebody used to live in that area. That was their home. That was their
yeah.
property. That was where their family was. And it's all gone. It's like wiped out from existence. Like, unless you find out about the history of what happened in those particular areas, you wouldn't even know there was a house or a part of a town that once existed in that area that is just
Hmm.
gone and there's nothing left.
It blows one's mind, doesn't it? And Chris said, not just grandchild to grandparent, but for the timeline. And I
Yes.
do think that the timeline absorbs that. It absorbs the anguish. It absorbs the devastation. I feel like land carries a memory just like we do.
Yeah. I think so too. And for, again, just like anything else, when you have such a tragedy like that, who knows how big and how powerful the aura is that
Mhm.
still, again, that still remains. And it almost makes you wonder too, because I was just thinking about this, is that whatever spirits remain in these towns, like if they are not aware of like whether what happened, or if they realize they've been killed, or the realization of what happened 100 years ago. The one thing I also can't help but wonder was one of the other tragic parts I forgot. This is something that should be noted, is that again, when this tornado struck, the tornado, it did not have like a typical appearance like you would see. This was a giant wedge shaped tornado, like about almost a mile wide. It was
Right.
a monster. And obviously it was what we would refer to obviously as a wedge tornado. The big mile wide tornado
Right.
means that it's a monster on the ground, but it wasn't just its size. It looked like a giant dust storm when it hits.
Yeah.
I mean, therefore, there are no photographs or film footage or even itself in progress. So therefore, we can only imagine what the tri-state tornado may have looked like. The closest I can come up with what it may have looked like was when you look at pictures from the Dust Bowl with the
Yes.
black blizzards.
Sorry.
That's probably what the tri-state tornado may have looked like, but people did not realize that this was a tornado until it was directly upon them. So you
Right.
have farm after farm that's just being completely swept away. People didn't know was coming. It was a huge grayish black mass. Again, people thought it was just a big dust storm. They had no
Well,
idea that it was actually, a monster tornado, 3/4 of a mile to a mile wide on the other side of that dust. Now, farm owners who are very weather wise, even back then. And normally, if they knew that there was like a tornado or a type of severe storm, if it was heading over to a nearby rural town, they would be able to obviously alert the nearby authorities and local law enforcement to alert the town of the storm's approach. And normally in U.S. history, it is very rare to have the farm owner killed by a tornado. A lot of people, don't get me wrong, have died in rural areas, but very few are farm owners. They are extremely weather-wise people. 30 farm owners were killed by this tornado throughout southeastern Illinois and southwestern Indiana. And if any of them were still remaining to this day, it makes you wonder, like, are they well aware that of what they just went through, that when they died, that it was a tornado, or do they still think that something was heading their direction? And they could, again, because even the most weather-wise farm owners, they couldn't even recognize it. So,
well, what we have here are they call them rain-wrapped tornadoes.
Yeah, correct.
And we had that's what we usually get. And if it had had a storm with that tornado, then the rain could have, they wouldn't even have seen the dust.
That's
the rain could have dampened it and tamped that down. So they wouldn't have known that's what was coming.
That's the other thing too. We also suspect that it may have came from what's called an HP supercell, high precipitation. Yeah. So it probably dangerously hit it in rain. And again, people did not realize the danger until it was directly upon them. So
exactly,
again, just the act, again, just not even understanding what you were seeing. People couldn't, like, people may have had an opportunity of seeing that. They'd be like, oh, that's odd. Never seen anything like that before. But it wasn't until they finally heard the roar of it, and that's when they realized with what they were dealing
unmistakable.
With, and they couldn't escape it. And like I said, just whatever still remains to this day, the activity there, it's got to be intense, and that's why I'm so curious of wanting to investigate those areas in a way to kind of do my own retracing of the path and try to see whatever evidence I can get through those areas. So again, that's why I'm trying to convince Jeremy of trying to get us down there, hopefully sometime next year.
Well, I think that would be interesting. And if you go and do that, I want to know about it.
Yeah.
Because I would love to go and do that. It just depends on the time frame. But
I don't think we're going to be able to be there for the actual anniversary in March, because let's face it, it gets cold still relatively, and not everyone is probably going to.
And you know that I'm not coming if it's cold.
Not to mention snow and stuff like that. So if anything, we would have to wait till the spring to go down there. I mean, as far as I know, it's not going anywhere. We got all the time in the world to head down there.
Yeah. Well, dude, we are just about out of time. I love our conversations. We get into some of the most interesting things, and I had the best time with you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me back on. I know it's been quite a couple of months, but it's definitely been a great time to really catch up with you, because I kind of did realize to myself that, it's been a long time since I've heard of Kat, and I'm surprised she hasn't reached out to me. So I'm glad you did. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
It'll come again. I just love talking to you.
I know.
I have so much fun. Yes. We've got such a good rapport. We've got so many of the same interests and a lot of the same experiences. And, it's just, I love the paranormal. You love the paranormal. And, it's just a good time. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you again. I really appreciate it. So this was fun.
Yeah. Thanks. And for everybody listening, thank you guys so much for being here too, because y'all are the reason that we do this. Nick and I both love sharing, and it's just a good time. So be sure and come back, and we will see you Wednesday night, where I have Chris DeSageray, the ghost boy of Geneseo, coming on with me. I know, right? I love Chris. So he's got a new film coming out. He's got this little bit more information is evolving out of his experience he's sharing. So come listen to him. He is actually also a good friend and a lot of fun. So you'll have a, and I actually got him to eat sushi for the first time when he came through Birmingham one day.
Oh, nice.
So he may never forgive me for it. But anyway, we will see you next week, or even Wednesday, same cat time, same cat channel. And, I just appreciate all of you being here. Be blessed. Have a great week and enjoy your life.
Good
Enjoy
night,
every
everyone.
day. Good night.